Hey there, welcome to the Hot Slice, the weekly podcast brought to you by Pizza Today magazine. I'm your host, Jeremy White, and I'm flying solo today. I've got Denise and Josh are both tied up on other projects right now as we work very diligently around the clock, as you all know, on Pizza Today magazine, as well as PizzaCon, which is coming up November 7th in Philadelphia. Don't miss that. And believe it or not, even though March 2025 seems to be a very long ways away right now, and it is, but we're actually pretty deep into working on some of the educational sessions for International Pizza Expo 2025 in Las Vegas. So a lot of irons in the fire, as they like to say, and no rest for the wicked. So you're kind of stuck with me flying solo today. Hopefully that's not too bad a thing for you. Going to keep it short and sweet today. Going to introduce our guest to you. Our guest today is Thomas Ardito. Thomas is the founder and owner of Brooklyn DOP in Brooklyn, New York. Thomas started in the gym industry. He still owns a very successful gym in Brooklyn as we speak. But during COVID, he started getting into baking, like so many. Started getting a real interest in making pizzas. He did have a pizza background, worked in the pizza business as a younger man anyway, and it's something that caught his interest. And next thing you know, he is now operating alongside his gym. He is now operating Brooklyn DOP, and it's doing really well. It's making some waves, making a name for himself in a very tough pizza market. What really inspired me about Thomas was his attention to detail, his desire to get kind of 1% better every day. So kind of in the realm of John Arena and those of that ilk. Thomas is really has kind of dedicated himself to making small improvements to his processes and his techniques with regards to his dough formula. So he's never really satisfied. He's just kind of always tinkering, always evolving, and that's what made for an interesting conversation. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Thomas.
Hi, I'm Genevieve Ruby, a fifth-generation dairy farmer here in Humboldt County, California. Did you know that 99% of California's dairy farms are family-owned? And we're proud to sustainably produce the milk that goes into quality cheeses you use to create your delicious pizzas. Thanks for helping make California not only America's #1 dairy state, but the leading producer of mozzarella too. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
Performance Food Service is proud to deliver high-quality products, innovative technology, and custom operational solutions to restaurants of all sizes across the country. The flagship division of Performance Food Group, with deep roots in the restaurant industry, Performance Food Service has been the exclusive distributor of the Roma family of brands for more than 65 years. This signature relationship has allowed Performance Food Service to become a leader in the pizza and Italian segment of food service nationwide.
All right. So Thomas, tell me just a little bit about, we had talked a while back over email, just about how tough the pizza scene can be in Brooklyn, right? You decided to open a pizzeria in the most competitive pizza market in the world, and you're doing great. But did you have any reservations about opening, thinking, what am I doing? This is, it's going to be hard here.
Yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, I really think that there's a shift happening in the pizza industry. This has been, since probably the mid 2010s, more of a shift towards, employing bread baking techniques and more artisan ways to make the pizza. And honestly, I really think that there's a place for that, like classic New York slice,
Mm-hmm.
as well as kind of this new school type of a product. And because the product was so good that we were making, even as just as a pop-up, when it really started to catch on by people who really understand pizza and were in the scene, and they were like, oh, I'm going to L'Industria, I'm going to Scars, I'm going to this, and then they would come have our pizza and be like, this is up there with that. It's a little different, you're a gym owner, I'm a gym owner. It's it's definitely an easy sell when you're just offering a low ticket, high
Yeah.
quality product that people could access if they want to. And I
Hmm.
really believe that there's kind of more of a just a geographical need. In New York City, it's like every 10 blocks, if you have a really good pizzeria, it's gonna do well, you know?
Hmm.
So just because this type of pizza isn't so ubiquitous yet, it's becoming more and more so, but um, it's a lot of people playing catch up. So I felt that since we were a little bit ahead of the curve, we wouldn't really have trouble establishing ourselves, and it would just really be a matter of time before it kind of caught on.
That makes sense. Kind of briefly describe to the listeners your style of pizza.
So this style of pizza would be it's hard to say. I think 4 years ago we would start, or 5 years ago, start calling it this like neo New York style.
Yeah,
I think I think artisan New York style pizza, which is exploding all over the country right now. I mean,
sure.
you can find this in every state at this point.
Yep.
Um, I think artisan New York style is where it kind of lands. It looks like a New York style pizza. It acts like a New York style pizza, but there's just kind of that wrinkle. There's kind of that
Yeah, yeah.
wrinkle in the recipe where uh, everything really just comes together in a very balanced way, and it really respects the fact that pizza, someone might want to kill me for saying this, but pizza at its core is bread. And I feel like if your pizza dough doesn't make a great bread, it might not be great pizza dough,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? Um, so I really feel like it's this New York artisan style, and that's where we're gonna land it and brand it essentially.
Fair enough. So where did you develop your dough formula? Obviously, like you said, you own a gym, and then you got into the pizza business. Where was it just trial and error in your home kitchen? Did you work for someone? Did someone teach you?
So I began in the pizza industry in 2004 in Long Island
Hmm.
as a delivery driver. And one day, you know, one fateful day, one of the pizza guys didn't show up. They needed help on the line. I used to make pizza at home with my father.
Yeah.
We would do like Sicilian style sfincione, so
Hmm.
definitely more of a different than a New York style, round type of pizza. But
Sure.
I knew my way around dough a little bit, right?
Okay.
Um, Now I left that in 2008. I worked at another place, a couple of other places on and off until 2010, just to like put myself through college, going for exercise science. But a lot of the stuff, what I realized is that the pizza was kind of good by mistake. They were kind of following the
Yeah.
recipe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 2 fingers of yeast in the winter, one finger in the summer.
Yeah.
Permanent rim on the Cambro container that they were pouring water in for 30 years and no one washed it because then they would what level it would be at.
So
And
true.
you know the deal. So it's like,
Yeah.
look, there's so many pizzerias that someone's gonna have good pizza, if they're just kind of following some weird superstitious recipe. So, getting into exercise science, really fell in love with writing training programs for people.
Yep.
And I really started to see like, all right, what we decisions we make week 1 changes what I'm doing week 12.
Sure.
And when I opened the gym and I started, I was always cooking, but I started like stress baking some bread, you know what I mean? Like, I'm
Oh yeah.
sweating. It's a tough business. And started reading more and more about artisan bread. And I read like Ken Forkish's book,
Hmm.
uh, read read Jim Leahy's book from Sullivan Street Bakery, and started to be like, okay, well, what if I kind of apply this to like Sicilian pizza, So in
Sure.
2016, 2017, I started to, freak out and really make a lot of Sicilians, looking for any excuse to make that, parties with friends and all that.
Hmm.
And, it was coming out with a really great product. And then I started turning my attention to like, oh, there are books about the Pizza Bible,
Yep.
started reading that, started reading some other books on pizza, started to see that there was an overlap. And just like I would study any great coach who writes great programs, I started
Mhm.
to look at all these recipes kind of like programs, started to see what they had in common,
Yeah.
not so much how they were different, focused on what they had in common, and then started to look at the differences. And then started to look at why are you using this type of flour? What's the difference? Started to experiment, started to keep track, started to use the same recipes with different
Yep.
flours at different protein levels, trying to see what the changes were, different hydrations, different amounts of oil, different amount of salt.
Hmm.
So I kind of zeroed in, and when I look at my old like recipe book, you could kind of see me zero in on the recipe. Then right before the pandemic hit in March of 2020, I actually did I was like, you know what? Once the gym gets stable, I'd love to open like a small slice shop one day.
Yeah.
It would be kind of cool. It was kind of a pipe dream. It wasn't like a definite like, let's do this right now.
Okay.
And then I enrolled with Goodfellas Pizza School because I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Let me get back in there. Let me get back in there. So I, trained with Andrew Scudera in Staten, Italy, Staten Island.
Yeah. Andrew's great.
Uh, yeah, it was great. Getting in there, we started beating up some dough in the Hobart, and he's like, work the lunch rush, right? Because I used to work like this. He's like, all right, you and my pizza guy, you guys are gonna do the lunch rush, and I'm like, oh shit.
Nice.
And we did it. He's like, oh, we got 30 kids coming in for a pizza class for a school. I'm sitting there, trying to teach little kids how to do the pizza and work in the room with him. And it was great to get back into it. And I love to be back into that environment. He respected all my
Yeah.
like ridiculous experiments, that we were trying to do and bringing in different poolishes and whatnot. And it was a great week. It was a great week over there with him. And it really got me into it. And I started to be like, and I was looking around at his recipe. I started to see him folding some semolina into the dough, and I'm seeing
Yeah.
what that's going to do. So I kind of landed on my recipe because I realized that, I needed to drop any sort of trends. The
Sure.
trend like 4 or 5 years ago was massive hydration
Yep.
in the dough. And I was like, I really wanted to settle on a dough that would work for both Sicilians and New York style.
Okay.
Over here in New York, and I'm sure it's true all over the country, I just don't have the experience. Um, Places are either known for their Sicilian or their regular pie,
Okay.
and it's usually because their dough just lends itself to being better at one than the other. They
Hmm.
do both, but one is great and one's all right, you
Sure.
know? So I really wanted to work on making this like omni dough, and through massive amount of DMs with like John Arena, he really helped me out. He's definitely a mentor.
Yep.
I kind of realized like I was working against myself
Hmm.
for the sake of like, all right, hydrating the dough and liking the qualities that gave it. But as I started to play with different flours, I was like, certain flours just like certain amounts of hydration. And when
Okay.
I'm blending flour, I have to really kind of, I really kind of have to respect that
Sure.
and give the dough what it needs,
Hmm.
essentially, and stop working against myself. So that's kind of how we settled on the recipe. And ever since then, it's been tweaked slightly, but really just to get more towards that ideal, you know.
Okay.
Don't necessarily say like, oh, this has changed, but they just know it's good, or oh, this is better than I remember. You know what I mean? So
Awesome.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what we're going for. This like 1% better all the time. So the recipe is a little bit of a moving target,
Yep.
but that's how we got there.
That makes sense. So you're always kind of evolving the dough, which, some of the people you mentioned, John Arena in particular, is a big proponent of that, that there's always, you're always experimenting. You're always trying to figure out how to, it's never perfect. So you're always trying to make it a
Oh
little bit
yeah.
better.
I mean, just look at pizza in, the late 2010s when this artisan thing started to take off
Sure.
versus now, and look at what's trendy. I feel like John and Chris Decker and that crew over there are kind of like the NASA of
It's a good
experimentation.
way to put it.
I mean, if you're look, yeah, NASA got obsessed with certain things at certain times. Right now, you look at these, they're taking micro blistering to a new level. It's like macro blistering. You know what I mean? Like these pies are all completely pimpled up, and you're like,
Yeah, right.
this is crazy, But they're just like seeing how far they could take this.
Yep.
It's great because look, they take, I see something like that, and I'm like, do I want to incorporate an element of this? How do I just get an element of this? How do I dial it up? How do I dial it down? What does it add to the pizza? Does it take away from the pizza I'm trying to make? And this is what's fun. If you stay connected with people and you talk,
Yep.
you do things like conversations like this, it really keeps you evolving. And
Yeah,
my goal
for
is not
sure.
to make the ideal pizza that I want to make. I'm sure the customer is going to like it. So, preparation and opportunity kind of overlap here a little bit, but I'm really just trying to make the pizza that I want to eat the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it. Where did you settle when you were experimenting? You talked about how the trend at one time was really high hydration levels. Where did you settle
So
for hydration level in your formula?
hydration right now we're at 65 because we're using mostly high protein flour,
Hmm.
but we're at about like 80% of high protein flour. um, Using Tony Gemignani's flour. I just feel like it outperforms a lot of the other high protein flours. It's got a little bit of the brand still in there, so it has like a nuttier taste to it.
Hmm.
Um, and then I use another central milling flour. I use a Artisan Baker's Craft Plus to knock the protein down a little bit, and I find that it kind of gives the interior crumb a little bit of, I don't even I don't even know what to call this kind of crumble. It kind
Okay.
of it almost dries out the inside a
Hmm.
very slight bit where it kind of crumbles
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
under your bite. And it plays nicely with the chew of the high gluten flour. And then we also use some semolina in there, so which is a very high protein flour too. So the average protein has got to be somewhere in the 14s.
Okay. Yeah.
So 65 sits nicely. Um, any less, I feel like my dough might rise a little bit too slow for the amount that I'm using,
Hmm.
right? We're going for like a 96-hour ferment. Like we make a
Okay.
poolish and then we um, make the dough the next day and go cold for 3.5 days.
Nice.
So I feel like if I dial the hydration down, my dough is going to rise a little bit more slowly, which may be good. Um, but it's going to throw off my operation a little bit for a while.
Yeah.
And if
Right.
I raise it, it'll probably blow up and I'll have to start playing with yeast. So I like to play with one variable at a time,
Hmm.
just to keep everything the same. Otherwise, I don't know why. It's like we said before,
Sure.
like there's a lot of pizzerias and some of them make great pizzeria, and it's just because there's so many pizzerias,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I don't want to do that to myself. I want to know why, you know?
That's
So
awesome.
if I come to Kentucky and, we're making pizza, I know that I could make my pizza for you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and it's funny you say that because that's one of the biggest things that competitors in Las Vegas at Pizza Expo and the Pizza Challenge, International Pizza Challenge, that's one of the things that always, no matter how prepared you are, if you're not from Las Vegas, the humidity is different, the temperature is different, and invariably their dough just never performs exactly like it does back home in their shop in Colorado or Florida or
Yeah.
Pennsylvania or wherever. So, yeah, it's very once you get a formula that works in your environment, that's
I
gold.
feel like New York is a pretty particular harsh pizza environment because
Sure.
it's so different
Yeah.
in mid-October than it is in mid-June,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? And you really have to have a process down. And the only adjustments that I try to make are like when we're pulling dough out of the fridge.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We every single day in our group text. I'm sure our counter people are really like annoyed by this. It goes off 3 times a day because we're taking, we're sending final mix temps into the chat. We're
Okay.
sending final ball temperatures into the chat and mix time, from when the mixer stops to when the dough gets put away. And we're trying
Okay.
to work within certain ranges, and they become a lot more strict in summer because even though we
Yeah.
keep 68 degrees down there,
Yeah.
there's a lot of heat exchange and humidity exchange. It still occurs, So yeah, we really try to just minimize the amount of things that will change or try to control.
Hmm.
I'd imagine, taking something to the Pizza Expo has to be probably the most frustrating thing for
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a perfectionist,
No doubt.
you
So
know.
do you notice, you probably notice, for example, if you're, what temperature do you like to, when you take right after the mix, when you take the temperature, what are you looking for?
So we want to be between it's a little cooler. And that's just because again, I haven't really adjusted my yeast in about a year. So I like it to be between like 66 and 69,
Hmm.
somewhere in there. If it starts to get to 70, that's when we'll cross stack the dough for like a half an hour to kind of, I don't want the fermentation curve to get too far ahead of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that we started to have an issue with dough blowing up a little bit because I had increased the amount of low protein flour, and that doesn't hold on to the dough so well when the yeast is trying to
Sure.
get moved.
Sure.
So, we kind of made an adjustment for that, but I'm trying to keep it lower temperatures. We do use like an auto lease, which kind of the temperature does rise when we do that.
Hmm.
And then we mix, which obviously we're using a spiral, but it still raises the temperature.
Yeah.
But we're finding the final ball temp is actually cooler than the final mix temp, which
Okay. Yeah.
is interesting. And that's
Yeah.
just because we're kind of logging out the dough and it's kind of cooling off as we're cutting it and dividing it.
So when your temps, let's say they get a little out of hand, a little warmer than you want, obviously you're going to notice that. Your pizza makers are going to notice that when they've got their hands in the dough and they're actually, messing with it. They're going to notice that. Does a customer at the end of the day, would they really notice that? Do you feel like?
That's highly dependent on the skill of the pizza maker.
Right.
You know, it really, the biggest thing that experienced pizza makers, it's just like in my gym, man. Like we have a certain way of training people.
Sure.
And when I get a coach who's got, 10 years of training on their resume or something, I still know that I'm gonna have to like start them fresh. Like, hey, you're gonna use our templates. If you have improvements you want to make to them, we could talk about it, but there's a reason for everything that's here.
Sure.
So if you educate me, I'm happy to change, you know? And it's the same thing with the pizzaiolos who come in. Oh, I've been doing this for 25 years. How many guys got fired that have 25 years of
Yeah.
experience? They're trying to do things their way, and they're trying to do party tricks with a dough that's like more relaxed
Yeah.
than, the drunk who's sleeping in my outdoor dining setup. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just like you have to obey the dough. You got to understand what the dough needs. And new pizza makers, they struggle with this the most, but I'd rather them learn on my dough,
Sure.
than go work somewhere else that's pulling dough straight out of the fridge, fighting it snapping back on them and, just throwing it in an oven
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
anywhere where it'll fit, right? That's a totally different kind of pizza making experience. So we really try to make it where there's not a huge difference between each of the pizza makers. And a lot of it is, waiting for those days where the dough blows up. Sometimes we pull out dough and like let it blow up and
Hmm.
I'll give it to them and just see what happens, you
Cool.
know?
All right. A little challenge there.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah. And then we
Nice.
just know where to work on it. It's not to like trip them up. It's just like,
Sure.
hey, here's a relaxed dough. Hey, there's this big bubble in the middle. If you pop that, there's gonna not be any structure in the middle. So it's gonna pop. What are we gonna do about it? Are we gonna pick the dough up when we're stretching it? Or are we gonna leave it on the table? What's gonna happen? Because it does bake up the same, if you do it right.
That's a great challenge for your crew. Do they enjoy that, or are they like, oh man, here we go again?
Uh, some of them really, some of the more like experienced guys, shout out to Aurelio, shout out to Angel. These guys will, like, if the dough is relaxed, they might like ho hum to themselves, but they're more focused on what happened to make it,
Okay.
so blown up in the
Yeah.
first place. They're trying to be like, guys, what went wrong? They could go into the chat and see like, oh, dough came out at 73 degrees and no one cross stacked it or whatever.
Okay.
You know, they meet the challenge. Honestly, I think it's just so reflexive at this point
Sure.
that the more experienced guys are just like, all right, whatever the condition is, we'll do it. But yeah, Friday night on the rush when every dough is blown up,
Another
yeah,
ball.
it slows you down because you can't pre-stretch anything.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. So yeah, it's more annoying when it's like that for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So once you got your formula down and you felt really comfortable with your dough, that's really one of the largest challenges that you face as a new pizzeria owner. What were some of your other major pitfalls or challenges besides figuring out the dough?
Figuring out the dough, I would say that you're talking about in relation to just operating a store in general,
Just in
or
general, just as as the owner of a pizza business. Yeah.
getting everyone on board to understand what the most important like cornerstones of the business are, that if these cornerstones are out of place, everything collapses. And the biggest challenge as we grow really becomes scheduling the day.
Okay.
Like the day needs to have a certain schedule and a rhythm, where certain things need to happen at certain times.
Sure.
People are coming in, working their shift, maybe they worked last night, maybe they're doing the dreaded clopin,
Yeah.
they close and then open the next day.
Yeah.
So they're, that closing the place is totally different than opening the place, right? So just getting everyone to follow the schedule, getting like, let's say someone on the counter who like decided to text and not make boxes at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Show them how it slows down the make line at 7:30. Everything comes to a stop. Trying to make them all understand, like playing as a team. When they see something wrong and they walk by and don't fix it,
Yeah.
how that affects everyone else. We share tips in the whole place, like, the upstairs is tipped in, the downstairs is tipped in, the pizza makers are tipped in. And I do that because I just want them to understand that, like, if you're having a bad day and you're up on the counter and you're treating people like you're checking people out like it's a grocery store and not a neighborhood pizza shop, you're hurting the dishwasher downstairs,
Yeah.
you know? So I think that's the biggest challenge, is just getting the buy-in from everyone and make them understand that, like, we're trying to build an institution. We're not trying to build like just a profitable business and a place to work. We want people to, take their first dates to our place. We want to see those people like get
Yeah.
married and bring their kids to our place. We want our employees to have their kids' birthday parties in the backyard and make friends with each other, make their own
Yeah.
connections. Like, that really just comes from everyone just buying in.
How do you get that? Last question for you. I know you're busy, but how do you get that buy-in? How do you get someone to, who's employed on an hourly wage, who it is at the end of the day, it's a job for them. How do you get them to turn that corner and it become a buy-in so that you can become the institution that you want to become?
I think that every employee works for different reasons. I think that owners think like, all right, this person is here just because of money and that's all they care about. That's all they care about. But when you actually talk to people, some of them want to be just like, they know that they're there for money, but they're here because they like it. There's a lot of places that they could go work for a similar wage, you know. But they're here because they like being here and working in a restaurant of any kind. I mean, you know, there's a reason that there's TV shows about this shit. You
Right.
know, it's there's a lot of drama and there's putting up with a lot of stuff. And even if you're trying not to put people over 40 hours of work, it's still a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that when you actually sit people down and ask them why they're working here, they'll kind of tell you how to get them to buy in. They're like, hey, I just like, you know, what would make me feel good is like someone just saying thank you at the end of the day, or like when customers say thank you, or, you know, I get to meet them or learn their stories, or, you know, when I can work in a team environment and I'm doing things that are benefiting the guy downstairs or the girl downstairs,
Yeah.
you know, it really makes them feel good, and you have to tap into that and keep it going and make them understand that like they're a part of the success of this place. And also like if that they want to move up, if they're there because they say like, hey, I'm here because one day I want to like be a manager, I'm here because I want to own a store one day, you have to like give them the path to that. And I think it's the same in any business, is find out their motivations. And if their motivations are something that you can't stoke, if you can't provide them that like kind of end goal that they're looking for,
Yeah.
you got to be straight up with that. You got to tell them early, because it's not going to work for either of you. And then you're going to
Sure.
have someone eventually dragging their feet in an environment where we can't do it. The
Yeah.
margins are too small for someone that's there to kind of not produce or not do their job and make someone else work harder.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing could fall apart. So I think you really got to just talk to the employee and pull it out of them and see how you can nudge them towards that.
I love it. That's great advice. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you and getting to learn about you know how you approach dough and just how you approach your business in general. So really
Thanks
awesome
for having
stuff.
me on, man. I'll
Yeah,
give
of
it all
course.
time.
Awesome. Well, go have a great day.
You too, man.
All right. Take care.